Welcome to the Alaska Weather Show, and yes, again, it is me. I'm on a marathon stretch here of the TV show. I'll be your host, Peter Chan, coming to you from the National Weather Service on this Tuesday afternoon, July 27th, 2021. And as always, if you'd like additional weather information, you can go to weather.gov/Alaska. A lot of things to talk about tonight. In the weather headlines, very wet in through west central areas. That rain is spread into the northern half of the state, up along and especially north of the Yukon River on up through the Brooks Range, especially the southern slopes there. And already Nome has picked up well over 1.5 inches, working on 2 inches of rainfall with this system. We also have high surf advisories for portions of the west coast, along with some gale force winds associated with an occluded front that'll be working through there tonight and tomorrow. Fire danger, though, will be diminishing across east central areas with the rainfall that'll be arriving. And then continue to see drier and a mild ridge setting up for south central areas in the Panhandle, so it'll at least bring a little drier weather. Still some cloud cover around, but at least any of the light showers that have been lingering around the Panhandle will begin to diminish, and a little drier weather here to take us through the end of the week. And no change on the extended forecast here for the beginning of August. Still looks like it'll be cool and wet in the west and warm and drier in the east. Well, here is where we have the high surf advisories in effect from 1 a.m. late tonight, 1 a.m. Wednesday morning through 4 a.m. Thursday morning. South-southwest gale force winds are going to cause water levels to be a good 3 to 5 feet higher than normal high tide from south of Wales through Nome and around Norton Sound to Stebbins, as well as including St. Lawrence Island. Is a pretty good system will be working its way across the region here, and before things begin to let up in early Thursday. Let's take a look at rainfall amounts. This is the rainfall forecast for 4 a.m. Wednesday morning through 4 a.m. Thursday morning there. And so Wednesday, still another soaker in the Nome area. Also up there around Kotzebue, eastward toward Kobuk and Ambler. West of Bettles, there could be some areas there pick up an additional 1.5 inches of rainfall or so. And then as we move into Thursday, on the right side of your screen, the rains will diminish along the western coast. Still, though, some areas of rain across the western interior, but it is looking at least drier along the Alaska Range and areas along the Alcan border as we go through the day on Thursday. And what does that mean, though, for fire danger? It's coming down. The only area that still had some higher fire danger was Yukon Flats, but as we head through Wednesday and Thursday with the arrival of that new rainfall, that's going to further reduce the threat of any significant fire starts. So there really is little or no risk here through the midweek period for Wednesday and on Thursday. And I wanted to show you a satellite image, speaking of wildfires. While our fire season is winding down as we head into August, it's just getting started in the western U.S. in the lower 48. And if you look on the satellite image, you may know this haziness from the northwest, the Pacific Northwest coast around Oregon, Idaho, Washington State, Montana, eastward through the Dakotas, Minnesota, Illinois, the Great Lakes, and all the way to the northeast. If you look off the northeast coast, you'll see kind of that haziness to the satellite image, and that is all wildfire smoke that's been transported essentially west to east. It's just been a really bad fire season there across portions of the western U.S., and that will continue as we're heading into the month of August, and they continue to see some very dry and hot weather. But on top of it, now they're starting to get some thunderstorms, which is going to increase the threat of new fire starts due to lightning strikes. Well, here's the satellite imagery, and the show stealer is that curl of clouds there out along eastern Russia up through the northern Bering, lower Chukchi Sea and west coast. You see the enhanced cloud tops, the brighter white cloud tops coming on shore there through the not just the western central interior, but back toward the west there, toward St. Lawrence Island. These are all enhanced cloud tops, so that means that they're producing heavier precipitation, heavier rainfall, and that's all just working its way eastward and associated with low pressure over far eastern Russia. And we'll have an occluded front extending out into the Bering that's going to be crashing on shore overnight and into the day Wednesday through western areas of the state. Still have a weak circulation down there in the lower Gulf, North Pacific, but it's of little consequence now. It's the one that brought some lingering light showers to the southeast panhandle. But even in the panhandle and south central areas, we're going to start to see Any lingering light showers let up a bit, though coastal areas will still have some IFR conditions, lower marine layer as the result of this ridge of high pressure there trapping that marine layer. But off to the west, that's where the significant low pressure system is there at the tip of eastern Russia, and the occluded front that'll be working eastward tonight with periods of moderate to locally heavier rainfall there through the Seward Peninsula. And as we go through the day on Wednesday, still the rain continuing, especially the northern and western half of the state, back out into the eastern Bering, whereas the ridge of high pressure holds there out over the Gulf, influencing the weather again along the southern coast and southeast coastal areas. Still could be an isolated or widely scattered light shower, but nothing as extensive as what we saw over the weekend or early in the week. So as we head into Thursday, still another trough working its way through the west with a band of rain out ahead of it through central interior and the interior southwest. Other areas, generally drier weather though for south central parts of the state and the panhandle. And looking at temperatures, lows tonight will generally be around 50 or so in the southeast, lower 50s across much of south central areas. Temperatures, if we can get a few peaks of sun, could get up close to 70 at Juneau, at least 69. And also areas of the south central interior could see mid to upper 60s. A little cooler along the coast where the lower cloudiness holds. Lows Thursday morning generally in the lower 50s. If there's any clearing, you could dip into the upper 40s. And then should recover back up near 70 there, say, Talkeetna and on over toward Glen Allen. Could also be up around 70 at Haines and Juneau. Along the Arctic coast, upper 30s, lower 40s. Generally steady rains, though, along the Seward Peninsula with low temperatures mid 40s to near 50 degrees, and then not much budge during the day. Lower 50s, Yukon Valley, and notice temperatures even up in the Yukon Valley, east central areas along the Alcan. Still staying below 70 for a change because they're getting clouds and rain, highs only in the 60s. Thursday morning, similar lows, the lower 40s along the Arctic coast, mid-upper 40s to near 50 there, Seward Peninsula, and generally around 50 to the lower 50s in the Yukon Valley. If we can get a little drying, some breaks, should be able to get temperatures Thursday afternoon back up above 70, Fairbanks, Fort Yukon down toward Northway, but otherwise dreary conditions, so it should be a little dry. The rain should let up there along the west coast on Thursday. For the southwest areas of the state, the interior will have lows in the lower 50s. With the rain coming down, and then along the Alaska Peninsula on out into the Aleutians, upper 40s to near 50 degrees for lows. Wednesday afternoon temperatures will be warmest up through the Kuskokwim River Basin, maybe mid-60s there. Otherwise, further west, readings only upper 50s to around 60 degrees, and then low temperatures. Thursday morning, most areas of the interior should stop in the lower 50s or so. And again, upper 40s to around 50 there through the tip of the Alaska Peninsula into the Aleutians. And Thursday afternoon, if we can get the clouds to thin, especially over the southern portions or just on the west side there of the Alaska range, could get readings mid to upper 60s, but still cool, only in the 50s. Emanak only 57, and as we get down to Mekoryuk, it's 54 degrees for a high, so it'll stay on the dreary side. But I wanted to show you again. Here's the extended forecast, and this theme has continued consistently now over the past several days when I've shown you. So this is for August 2nd through the 6th. I believe that's Monday the 2nd through Friday the 6th. So that's the first week there of August. And we're looking for above normal temperatures along the Alcan border over much of the eastern half of the state, with near normal temperatures in the west. But precipitation is still looking like it's going to average above normal there in through the west, especially centered in on the Seward Peninsula and the Yukon Delta. So I would just say anticipate more wet weather there with this kind of pattern setting up, as low pressure will be sitting out, especially over the western half of the Bering. Eastern areas of the state should be drier, especially down there toward Yakutat into the northern portion of the Panhandle. So some areas of the state will still enjoy some drier and warmer later summer weather, whereas in the west we are looking for things to stay cool and wet there as we started.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Well, it's time now for your aviation weather, and if you have a flight planned for Wednesday into Thursday this midweek, we have the most active weather in the west side of the state, a stronger area of low pressure over eastern Russia, and there's going to be a couple of frontal systems working its way on up through the west coast. producing some gustier winds, lower and mid-level winds that will create turbulence, gale force winds across parts of the Bering, and also some heavier rainfall that will extend into the western interior on the order of 1 to 3 inches, what has fallen since yesterday, Monday, on up through the day on Wednesday. And we expect IFR conditions along, especially south of the Brooks Range, and then also continuing, we'll see IFR conditions along the west coast and areas of the Gulf, but at least the southeast panhandle will begin to dry out. The scattered showers are going to become more isolated, and at least they'll enjoy a little drier conditions there as we round out through the latter half of this week. Otherwise, the west coast remains IFR, and again, that's where the bulk of the active weather is. Precipitation will be spreading eastward across the entire central and eastern side of the state there, especially up through the Yukon Valley northward. And so we do expect the areas there along the Brooks Range to remain IFR. IFR also continuing Prince William Sound, parts of the northern Gulf, along the Pacific side of the Alaska Panhandle, and much of the Aleutian Chain. And then Thursday afternoon, we should see some VFR conditions, at least there, more so of the southeast quarter of the state, especially south and southeast of Fairbanks to along the Alcan border. So past conditions on Wednesday, Anaktuvik will generally be IFR, especially the south entrance, but may give way to MVFR conditions, north entrance and flying northward. Same thing at Adigan, generally IFR, especially south entrance, south slope of the Brooks Range. MVFR, though, as you get to the north entrance and fly farther north. Further south and west, Lake Clark will see MVFR conditions try to become VFR for a time there on Wednesday. Merrill should generally hold as MVFR. That'll be the case not only for rainy, but windy, and Isabel passes should see MVFR conditions throughout the day on Wednesday. Farther east, Mentasta, we'll see MVFR become VFR there for a time, especially by afternoon. And Tonita should generally hold on to MVFR conditions. And as we go to Portage, call it IFR, it's kind of a split. The east entrance, east side, especially toward Prince William Sound, will remain IFR on Wednesday, but the west entrance will generally be MVFR. And then taking a look at the northern panhandle, Chilkoot and White Passes will start out with some IFR in the early morning, but giving way to MVFR later in the morning and especially by afternoon. Freezing levels across the state interior are generally between 8,000 and 10,000 feet. In the southeast, they're running right around or just above, below 8,000 feet. And then notice in through the west and back through the Aleutians, there's some warmer air resulting in higher freezing levels around and above 12,000 feet along portions of the west-southwest coast, and a pocket of around or just above 14,000 feet over the eastern Aleutians, and that's all out ahead of that stronger occluded front that's going to bring the gustier winds. So icing potential will be greatest across west central areas of the state, including the Seward Peninsula on up toward Kotzebue Sound inland to the west central interior between 14,000 feet and a flight level of 20,000 feet. Generally, icing will be above either 12, 14, or 16,000 feet as you trail southwestward back out into the eastern Bering in response to that plume of warmer air, moist air ahead and along that occluded front. Upper level jet stream winds are strongest there and through the west Bering Strait, upwards to a 90-knot wind max just south there of St. Lawrence Island, with southwesterly winds pouring on shore. Weak high pressure circulation over the southwest peninsula there, and then as we go down to the mid levels, broad 50-knot area, 45, 50-knot area of southwesterly winds advancing across the western third of the state out ahead of that upper level trough and then low pressure center over eastern Russia. And as we get down to 3,000 feet, strongest winds are smack dab over the west from portions of the Seward Peninsula, Norton Sound, and the lower Yukon Valley, upwards to 55 knots from the southwest. That will result in isolated severe turbulence in portions of the Seward Peninsula down into Norton Sound and the southwest there in the lower Yukon. Between its surface and 4,000 feet. They'll be a little lower toward St. Lawrence Island between surface and 3,000 feet. So if you are able to get out at all, you might have to wait. Certainly check the latest observations and conditions and have a safe flight where you can.
Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder, and joining me once again is Eric Stevens from GINA, the Geographic Information Network of Alaska, based up at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Eric, welcome back to the program.
Hey, I'm glad to be here.
And once again, you brought some wonderful satellite pictures to show us and do a little show and tell about. It's just amazing. I can get lost in satellite pictures all day. What did you bring today?
Right. Well, weather satellites, what are they good for? Yeah. Of course, there's the pretty pictures that they bring us. You know, we've got a picture here from April of 2012. Okay. The SUMI NPP satellite, it's what they call a polar orbiter, which means it covers Alaska because we're near the pole. Beautiful image. You can see a storm off of southeast Alaska, the sea ice along the Bering Sea up into the Arctic. A really nice picture, and this is important because it allows a forecaster to see where the storms are, where the ice is, where the clear areas are. You need to know where the weather is now if you're going to forecast it into the future. Exactly. So satellites give us these good pictures. This is called surveillance of the weather. And you know, that same satellite also has another picture from a little more recently, August of 2014, Tropical Storm Iselle bearing down on the Hawaiian Islands. Hawaii doesn't get hit by a whole lot of tropical storms or hurricanes. Sometimes it does. And here's a picture from the same satellite, the SUMI NPP Polar Orbiter. It shows Tropical Storm Iselle approaching the Hawaiian Islands from the southeast. You can see the storm swirling away there, and then there's the Hawaiian Islands. This is a tropical storm, not quite as strong as a hurricane because we don't see the eye wall in there. This is still a serious weather system. And all of this information comes just from that satellite picture. It's so much information, and it's wonderful to look at. You see the beauty and the awe of nature right there depicted in that weather satellite. We call it a polar orbiter because the satellite flies high over the globe. Maybe we could look here at we happen to bring the planet Earth with us. This is our satellite. A polar orbit flies really close to the Earth, maybe 800 kilometers over the Earth, and goes up over the pole and then back down, and then the Earth spins under the satellite as it goes by. That's in contrast to the geostationary birds, which are much further out. And they don't view Alaska quite as well. So we love those polar orbiter satellites here in Alaska.
So when we're a lot closer, we get much better details and imagery and an idea of a better maybe position of what's going on when it's passing right over Alaska or right over Hawaii.
Yes, exactly right. The polar orbiter gives such a good view of places like Alaska. And because it's close to the planet, there's another aspect of satellites in the polar orbit that is helpful for weather forecasting. It's an aspect that's maybe not as immediately obvious as the pretty pictures that we see. And that is the capacity for the satellite to produce what's called a sounding. That is finding the vertical profile of temperature and moisture in the atmosphere. We've all heard of weather balloons. Weather balloons are launched here in Alaska twice a day at a number of airports, everywhere from Barrow to St. Paul Island to Kodiak, Anchorage and Fairbanks, Yakutat, a number of places. Launch these balloons, and we've got a picture of a balloon being launched at an airport, and the balloon goes up. It's pulling a little package, an instrument package with it that reports temperature, pressure, humidity data back, and we use that information to help feed what are called numerical weather prediction models.
The models.
The models, right. It's a mouthful, so we just call it the models. And these computer simulations, these models, they're computer programs that simulate the motion of the atmosphere. Well, how does a model know what the future will be like? You have to tell the model what things are like now. And you give it all kinds of information, including information from these satellite sounders. Very important. Just how important are they? We have a recent, comparatively recent study that really brings home, and this is Superstorm Sandy. We have a track image here of the track of Hurricane Sandy. It was down in the Caribbean around Cuba, and then it moved north over the ocean, offshore of the eastern seaboard, and then at the last minute, Sandy made what's called the left hook. It turned hard to the left and slammed into New Jersey. Was a major problem for the mid-Atlantic states, a calamity. It fused with another weather system and became known, this is not an official title, but Superstorm Sandy. It was quite the weather event. Well, the modelers, after the event, there's a group of modelers in Europe. They have a very good model, a frustratingly good model if you're the Americans trying to pursue their excellence. They reran their model afterwards in what's called a data denial study, where they kept everything the same. So this is 6 months after Sandy, but they went back, they reran the same model, they fed the model the same initial conditions, that is telling the model, okay, here's where we think Sandy is, down near Cuba in the Caribbean. Everything was the same as it was in the real forecast, except they didn't let the model know.
No satellite data.
No satellite data.
Okay.
So we're going to put that over here. No satellite data for you. The resulting forecast 5 days out, back when the real Sandy was happening and the model had the satellite data, the forecast was pretty good. We've got a graphic here on the left side. We show the forecast of where Sandy would be, and that's the red bullseye on the left. It's just south of where it actually wound up hitting. Not a bad forecast from this computer simulation, 120 hours out. On the right, you see the same model, but it didn't have the satellite data to help it understand things. And the storm is way offshore. It misses. The forecast is more accurate when the model has the satellite data. So that's the idea today we want to convey is weather satellites. They're important because they show us the pictures of where storms are. We see good examples of this. Yeah, the surveillance right now, it's great to look at those pictures. And in addition, behind the scenes, maybe not immediately obvious, but the models have to have that satellite data for them to be good forecasts. And then a meteorologist uses that information to help everyone with the forecast of where the storms will be in the future.
That is fascinating information that we can look at, see where things have been, because you can't know where you're going if you don't know where you've been. That's that old adage there. But seeing that satellites are actually helping us move forward in the weather information system is pretty amazing stuff.
You bet.
And if you want to check out Eric's satellite images that he's been talking about, whether that's something from today or last week or even much further back in Alaska history, you can easily do that yourself. Go to www.gina.alaska.edu and you can find those images there. Eric, thanks so much for joining us once again. And again, we will join you hopefully again soon for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts, where you'll tell us more really cool information about the satellites over our heads in Alaska. Thanks for joining us tonight, and we'll see you next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back, and in today's Sea Ice Edge, we still have some brash ice there in the lower Chukchi Sea that originally broke away from the Russian coast, and we're going to see winds picking up from the south upwards to about 30 knots there, even some gale force winds from the Bering Strait southward down toward St. Lawrence Island. Along the Arctic coast, winds will have more of an easterly component, so the ice is not going to have a tendency to pull northward, but nevertheless we do continue to expect some slow melting here over the next several days, with the main southerly winds set up there through the lower Chukchi Sea. At least it looks like even into Thursday they'll come down a bit. In the meantime, the inner canals of the southeast will have variable winds, 5 to 10 knots, waves a couple of feet. And then along the outer the Gulf Coast there, 10 to 15 knot winds north-northwesterly and waves a few feet. More variable once you get up around Yakutat westward, with waves there around 3 feet. And then on Thursday, look for north winds 10 to 20 knots, waves a couple of feet though, maybe a little higher, 3-4 feet in Lynn Canal. And generally northerly component to the wind there across much of the central areas at 15 knots, waves 4 to 5 feet. And then across south central parts, off the Kenai, Prince William Sound, variable winds around 10 knots, waves 2, maybe 3 feet. In through Cook Inlet, there'll be a southerly component to the wind, 20 to 25 knots, a little channeling, and waves could be as high as 5 to 6 feet off of Homer and at the mouth of Cook Inlet. Winds will come down a little bit there at the Cook Inlet on Thursday, 15 to 20 knots, waves 3 to 4 feet, and still variable winds around 10 knots off the Kenai into Prince William Sound, with waves 2 to maybe 3 feet. The Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak Island, we'll see southwest winds 20 to 25 knots, waves maybe as high as 5-6 feet around Shelikof Strait. Otherwise, either side of the peninsula, south winds 20 to 30 knots, waves 4 to 5 feet. And on Thursday, still southwest winds 15 to 20 knots around Kodiak Island, with waves of 3 to 5 feet. Otherwise, either side of the peninsula, we're looking at south winds of about 20 to 25 knots and waves 4 feet there around Bristol Bay off of Chignik, and then upwards to 6 feet south of Sand Point and north of Cold Bay. Out across the eastern Aleutians, winds will be 20 to perhaps as high as 30 knots there north of Dutch Harbor, and waves will generally be 4 to 5 feet either side, turning more westerly at 15 knots with 6 to 7 footers west of Adak through Kiska and Shimia. And then for Thursday, a little weak trough passing through will try to turn the winds around more to the southeast there over the eastern Aleutians at 15 to 20 knots, waves 6 feet on the Pacific side, 4 to 5 feet on the Bering side, and a little more easterly, northeasterly component there as you get west of Adak, with waves of 4 to 5 feet. The real action, though, will be across the west coast as an occluded front with that stronger low over far eastern Russia will cause gale force winds upwards to 35 knots from the south, with waves building 10 to near 15 feet north of St. Paul off of Nunavik Island and south of St. Lawrence on up to between Savunga and Nome. And then winds will come down a bit on Thursday, still southerly though at 20 to 25 knots, and waves generally 6 to 7 feet, though lesser, more variable winds setting up around St. Paul and St. George with 5-footers. And we'll see the winds build across the lower Chukchi Sea from the southeast and south at 30 knots, upwards to 35 knot gales as you get through and south of the Bering Strait, and easterly winds 15 to 25 knots along the Arctic coast. On Thursday, the winds will be turn more southwesterly at 20 knots, Prudhoe Bay off toward Katavik there on the eastern portion of the Arctic coast. And then still southerly, but coming down to around 25 knots there across the lower Chukchi Sea, especially south of Wainwright down through Wales, and waves running 7 feet. And we can see that low pressure center over far eastern Russia tonight with an occluded front working its way in through the west coast, creating those gale force winds through west central areas, and continued areas of moderate to heavy rain along the Seward Peninsula extending into the central interior. And then on Wednesday, that low will continue to split a bit and start to fill a little, and a secondary trough will be approaching the west coast and moving through on Thursday. That should allow the rains to let up in the Seward Peninsula, but press some additional bands of light to maybe occasionally moderate rain into the central interior and portions of the southwest interior. So that does it for the show tonight. I'm glad you were able to join us. I'm going to get a little break here, and I plan to see you again early next week.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.